Tonight, we drift into the late 14th century English countryside on All Hallows Eve. A quiet tale to help your body loosen and your breath slow. If you enjoy this video, please consider subscribing. Now, take a deep breath. Get comfortable, and let's begin our journey to this Benedictine Abbey.
The road ahead sinks under the autumn rain, and you trudge it step by measured step through the wet fields and hedgerows. Mud takes your shoes as if each print belongs to the earth more than to you, and the ruts carved by cartwheels gather brown water that rocks and shivers with every gust. Your cloak has grown heavy with damp, and the wool smells of lanolin and smoke, a homely scent made weary by distance. Beyond the pasture gates and the darkening ploughland, a bell tower lifts through the mist. You inhale and taste iron and leaf mould, and the wind presses your hood against your ears until the world becomes a softened hum of rain. Though you have walked later into the evening than you meant to, the sight of the Abbey steadies your pace and soothes your unease. Travellers after dusk are not always welcomed. You know that gates close with the evening bell, not from hardness but from caution and order. But that's little comfort to those shut out in the rain. You keep to the crown of the road where the mud is a little shallower, and you mark your progress by puddles that reflect a sky thinning into twilight. Here and there the hedges open to reveal ridges of cultivated ground, the long curving furrows filling with water until they gleam like dull pewter. Your hands are stiff from the cold, and the staff you carry knocks quietly against stones hidden in the muck, a rhythm that tethers you to each next step. Somewhere, faint and far, a bell gives a slow, evening note that seems to hang in the air longer than sound should, the old bronze speaking through mist. You think of thresholds and of the rule that guides those within, hours for prayer, hours for work, and times when speech subsides into silence, not unfriendly but firm. The thought that a porter might decline you after sunset tightens your chest, even as you remember that monks are charged to receive the stranger and the poor as Christ, within measure and prudence. The tower grows larger, its outline gathering edges, and you find yourself rehearsing the few words you will need, your errand humbly stated, your hands open to show you carry nothing but your worn satchel and the road's patience. A dim lantern begins to move along the wall walk, that narrow path atop the precinct wall where the evening watch makes its rounds, and the little circle of honey-coloured light proves more compelling than the tower itself. You draw closer to the gatehouse, a squat mass of stone with a pointed arch dark as a cave mouth, and the rain drips steady from its eaves in threads that gleam and vanish. The smell of wet oak from the doors mingles with damp mortar and the faint warmth of some inner fire, and in that mix you sense the difference between the open world and the enclosed life. The porter's lamp comes to rest at a hatch within the gate. The panel lifts with a small scrape, and a wedge of light spills over the slick flags. You lift your hood just enough to show your face, keeping your hands low, and with a quiet nod you give your name, the road behind you, and the hope for a dry corner and a heel of bread. The man within is mostly shadow and lamp glass, but you catch the shape of a tonsured head and the powdery gleam of wax on his fingers, and you hear the gentle clink of a key ring somewhere near his belt. He does not speak at once. Whether for the house's silence or out of careful habit, he lets the moment stretch, measuring your condition and your request with a gaze that seems to weigh without wounding, and you wait with the rain as your only companioning voice. Standing before the shut gate, you feel the line between the world of hedges and inns and weather and the ordered precinct where bells keep time like a second sky. A draught flows under the door, not cold as the field wind, but cool and clean, and in it you catch the kitchen's smoke, thinned by damp air, and the ghost of herbs crushed by rain somewhere within the walls. The lantern's glow turns the droplets on the ironwork into quiet constellations, and your breath joins them, a small mist that rises and dissolves as if agreement were possible between the outside and the inn. You know that abbeys close their gates when light fades, that watch is kept for good reason, and that hospitality, while steady in the rule, has to find its way through the practicalities of night and unknown faces. The season itself seems to counsel patience, the year leaning toward All Hallows Tide, when evenings lengthen and Christians fast and remember, keeping company in prayer with the departed, not with fear, but with reverent kindness. You let that thought settle like a stone in a stream bed, something firm beneath your shifting footing, and you straighten a little, not to insist, but to show you will bear whatever answer comes. Within the hatch the porter's hand moves, keys whisper, the bar receives a careful touch, and there is a pause that feels like a held breath, a boundary thick with rain and possibility, where judgment and mercy balance, and you, travel-worn and hopeful, simply wait. You wait beneath the jut of the gatehouse roof, while water drums a steady rhythm from the tiles and runs in silver chords off the eaves. The smell of wet earth rises from your hem, heavy as your footsteps have been all day, and your hands feel the chill of the staff that has brought you this far along the sodden lane. When you knock again, softer this time, a square of darkness within the wicket shifts, and a lantern lifts, its glow smoothing the angles of a lined face under a cowl. The porter studies you with a glance that has measured countless travellers, not unkind, only careful, as if weighing rain, distance, and intent alike. Silence sits between you, the sort of silence that belongs to a rule rather than to reluctance, and you find yourself settling into it as though you have been invited to breathe more slowly. You raise the brim of your hat so your pilgrim badge catches the light, and his eyes rest there for a moment, understanding enough. A key scrapes inside the wood. Then the unseen bolts take their turn, iron upon iron, patient, deliberate, each sound softened by the rain. Your shoulders dip at the simple relief of being expected, or at least not refused, and you feel how fatigue makes humility come naturally. The porter nods once, and the sliver of the gate widens to a door, so the night opens into light, and the world changes shape. When you step through, the wind drops away as though it has been told to wait outside, and the courtyard gathers you into its quiet like a cloak. Lanterns swinging from hooks turn the cobbles into a scatter of warm islands, each puddle holding a little trembling moon, and the smell of damp stone replaces the sour tang of road and hedge. A darker arch hints at the kitchen beyond, and somewhere a hearth must be burning, because you catch a breath of smoke softened by peat and the distant memory of bread. The porter lifts his light and gestures, and you notice a place set with a rough mat where guests scrape their soles, a small mercy for the flaws within. You obey the gesture and watch the mud fall in thick curls, the clods loosening like the day's worries, and when you straighten, the porter's mouth curves in the ghost of a smile that is gone almost as soon as you see it. The quiet still holds, not severe, merely sturdy as a stone wall, making a frame around every sound. The drip from your cloak, the soft clink of the lantern's hook against its ring, the distant murmur of water running off the gutters. You pass under another arch, and the air cools in a clean way, as if the building has its own weather, and the courtyard with its rain is already a step behind you. On the walls you glimpse painted saints softened by decades of candle smoke, their colours dim but steady, and they watch you without judgment from their plaster shores. Ahead, a covered walk stretches, the porter's lantern beckoning along its sheltered length, and your feet begin to find a quieter pace. You do not speak, yet your movement feels like an answer to an invitation. The cloister receives you with the grace of a porch that has waited all day for your arrival, and the garden at its centre speaks a gentle litany with scent instead of words. Rosemary leans heavy with rain, its resinous breath thickening the air. Sage holds dew like small lanterns along its velvety leaves, and a tangle of mint releases cool freshness where your hem brushes the path. The garth's grass lies flattened in patches, a green quilt stitched with narrow paths, and a low wellhead sits like a small altar to clean water in a season of mud. Between the columns, the rain is a moving curtain, the sound of it changing as it meets stone, leaf, and tile, until your ears begin to map the place by listening. The walk itself carries the quiet marks of habit, smooth hollows in the paving where sandals have passed in their hours, a bench polished by robes at the turn to the chapter house, the gentle, persistent order of a life that is counted and offered. You inhale, and the scent of the herbs sets up a counterpoint to the wet wool on your shoulders, a hint of kitchens and physic gardens, of hands that have tended both body and soul with leaves gathered under this very eve. Crossing from the open sky to this encircled green, you feel a boundary draw itself around you, that is not a fence but a rhythm, a turning inward that belongs as much to breath as to prayer. The porter walks a pace ahead, lantern held low to protect the flame from stray draughts, and his robe lifts and falls like a bellows with his steps. You keep time with him without meaning to, as if the very architecture were teaching you to move differently, and some part of the road in you begins to unclench. At the far corner, the walk bends toward a door that sits modestly under a timber lintel, the kind of entrance made for people rather than processions, and the porter pauses to angle the light so you can see the threshold. There is a wooden board set on pegs with a clean rag draped over it, and beside it, a narrow bucket to catch whatever your coat gives up. You realize that even welcome has its small rituals. He lifts his hand, 2 fingers, precise, to invite you to rest your staff against the wall, and when you do, the release of its weight feels like an oath you are glad to relinquish for a night. Within, a low room opens, its rush-strewn floor smooth underfoot, a bench along one wall and a brazier sending up a thin thread of heat that smells faintly of iron. A lay brother crosses silently from a side door, acknowledges the porter with a nod, and brings a coarse towel which he offers without a word. His hands are chapped and clean, and he waits without hurry while you dry your face and push damp hair from your eyes. The rule has not asked anything of you yet except quiet, and you give it willingly, because your voice has grown rough with weather and distance, and the hush makes a better shelter. When the porter takes back the towel and makes a small sign towards the next passage, it occurs to you that there is a whole language of gestures here, shaped by necessity and kindness, and you have begun to learn it. You step forward, passing between walls that hold the day in a cool embrace, the scent of rosemary still clinging to your sleeve, and a ferny shadow of mint close to the hem. The door closes softly behind you. The rain recedes by one more room's width, and the boundary you crossed at the gate settles more surely, not like a barrier, but like a garment offered to keep you from the wind. You are led to a trestle where a trencher of brown bread waits, its crust dark with the sheen of the oven and its crumbs smelling faintly of malt. Beside it, a wooden bowl holds lentil stew, the steam carrying notes of onion, leek, and a whisper of bay, as if the garden itself had leaned close to breathe warmth into your face. A clay cup cools your palm, and when you tilt it you taste ale drawn from the cellar, round and grain-sweet, with a chill that reminds you of stone steps and damp barrels tucked beneath the earth. The bench is plain and steady, and the rushes underfoot hush the scrape of your boots as you settle, easing your pack down with a care born of habit and aches. A monk gestures with 2 fingers and a gentle dip of the head towards the bread, inviting you to take, then touches his own chest with an open hand, an introduction without sound. The room is lit by candles set in iron prickets, their beeswax fragrance mingling with the stew, and a sense of light held carefully within. Walls touches your shoulders the way a cloak does when someone lays it across you. Around you the monks move as if the air were water, and they learned long ago how to disturb it as little as possible. They pass platters with small, deliberate signs, a thumb brushed across the palm for bread, 2 fingers curved for a pitcher, a flat hand lifted for enough, all of it a language that keeps the quiet whole. Sandals whisper against the rushes, and sleeves of rough-spun wool fall back as a ladle dips, rises, and tilts, sending a ribbon of stew into your bowl again when you hesitate. One brother's eyes meet yours just long enough to offer reassurance, and he sets a bit of cheese by your trencher with a smile that lights only the corner of his mouth. At the far end, a single voice begins to read in measured Latin from a small lectern, the syllables even and soft, not demanding your understanding so much as laying a steady cadence over the clink of spoons. You bow your head when the others do, form the sign you have formed since childhood, and let the rhythm of this place, learned through repetition and care, guide your hands. The food feels honest in your hands in the way a well-worn knife feels honest, shaped by use and intent rather than ornament. The bread breaks with a sound like dry twigs, and it carries the taste of barley and the stored warmth of a hearth. The stew is humble and thick, the lentils dissolving into a comfort that spreads from your tongue to your chest. You sip the ale and think of the cellarer moving among barrels set on trestles, tapping a wooden spigot until the measure is true, his work as quiet as the water that seeps through stone. Between bites, you notice how the aches of the road loosen their grip, not all at once, but like knots confronting heat. A shoulder eases, a tender foot finds a new angle on the floorboards. Your jaw unclenches without command. Your thoughts stretch out slowly, no longer scanning the horizon for a place to stop, no longer measuring the light left in the evening. They accept, tentatively at first, that the night will pass under a roof made secure by others' keeping. You chew and swallow and let silence do what it does well, which is make space for breath. When the bell stirs the air, it does not startle. It arrives like a low wind across grass, a round note that finds the seams between beams and stones and threads itself there. The reader's voice closes, the book is kissed and set aside, and the gentle choreography of rising begins, each movement an echo of 100 yesterdays. You set down the cup and glance toward the guest brother, unsure whether the summons includes you, and he inclines his head in a clear yes, one hand already lifting to indicate the door toward the cloister. The benches are left as they were, bowls stacked with mindful order, and a pair of novices carry candles into the corridor, their flames in small, protective cups of palm and fingers. You fall in behind the line, neither at the end nor the beginning, your step trying to match the pace of the sandals ahead, a pace that is unhurried even when a bell is calling. Out beyond the walls, the rain continues its long, even speech to the fields, and in the passageway it becomes a sound held at a distance, like a memory that no longer requires a response. The light grows gentler as you move, as if the candles were teaching the dark to be companionable rather than adversary. Beeswax breath turns sweet where the corridor narrows, and the stone beneath your feet offers back a coolness that makes you aware of your own warmth, as if you were carrying a small fire under your cloak. The cloister garth shows through an arcade, dark earth shining where the rain has laid down the rosemary stems, droplets pebbled along the sage like glass beads on wool. The smell of bruised herb lifts up, green and clean. You think, in a quiet corner of your mind, how this covered walk binds the living spaces to the chapel, how it asks feet to trace a square of prayer before they step into song. The guest brother touches the edge of your sleeve lightly to guide you at a turning, no words necessary, and the line bends toward a door whose iron strap hinges are black with age. By the time you pass through, the bell has faded to a memory of metal, and the sound that remains is the soft assembly of men finding their places. In this hour the community keeps Vespers, the evening office that gathers up the day and offers it back like grain measured into a scoop, smoothed with the flat of the hand. In the 14th century the day is wrung into shape by such hours, matins and lauds in the deep night and early morning, then prime, terce, sext, and none across the sunlit span, and now vespers as light thins, with compline still to close the door of night. The psalms will be sung in patterns learned by heart, antiphons will frame them like borders on a page, and candles will stand in for the stars when clouds hide the sky. The calendar draws close to the vigil of All Hallows, when the evening before the feast of All Saints turns thoughts toward the great company of the departed, not with costume or jest, but with fasting and prayer, sober and hopeful in equal measure. That fuller explanation will come from the abbot later, but even now you sense how these hours knit the living to those gone before, how the measured voice and the swing of incense make a bridge the heart can cross without fear. You stand at the back, by a pillar that feels solid against your shoulder blade, and wait to be taken by the chant the way a slow tide takes a leaf. A brother slips a small booklet into your hands, a psalter worn soft as cloth at the edges, and points to a page with a nod. not expecting your tongue to shape the Latin, only inviting your eyes to rest where theirs will rest. The choir forms two facing ranks. The candles pick out the lines of stone ribs overhead, and the floor holds the warmth of the day trapped in its slabs, as if the sun had left a last gift when it withdrew. You sense your uncertainty thinning, like mist when a wind rises, not because you have learned the rules, but because the rules here are gentle and steady, and they will carry you even if you are not yet sure how to walk with them. Somewhere in the chapel a thurible lifts and falls, and the first curl of incense finds you with a fragrance like resin and honeyed wood, softening the air, removing any sharpness left in it. You are not asked to be more than you are, a traveller at day's end, and so you allow yourself to be held in this shared pause where breath gathers just before the note. When the chant begins, you lean your back a little more against the pillar, place your fingers on the smooth page, and feel the evening rely on its own beautiful order. You stand at the edge of the nave, rain still whispering from your hem as the chant opens like a slow river beneath the vault. Candles settle into their soft blaze, and the stone ribs overhead seem to breathe with the rhythm of the psalms, steady and unhurried. You find a narrow place along a bench and fold your hands, unsure of the gestures but content to follow the curve of the community as they bow and rise. The air is warm with beeswax and the resin of incense, a gentle sweetness that blurs the sharp scent of your wet wool cloak. A monk passes, head lowered, and a lantern's soft halo slides across the floor, catching the gleam of brass and the pale gleam of a page. You listen, letting the Latin shape itself around you without demanding meaning, each syllable a small stone placed in a wall that keeps weather and worry at bay. When the Magnificat blooms near the end of the office, its familiar swell seems to lift your tired chest, and your breath falls into time with its measured glide. After the last antiphon, the community grows still, and the abbot steps forward with the careful ease of one who has worn the same sandals for many seasons. His voice is low, a thread drawn through the listening hush, and you lean into the words as if toward a hearth. He says this night is called All Hallows Eve, the vigil before the feast of All Saints, and that in this 14th-century abbey the vigil holds a simple weight: remembrance, fasting, and prayer. You learn that the observance opens a span of 3 days, a small tide within the great calendar of the year. The vigil tonight, the feast of All Saints tomorrow, and All Souls' Day the next, when prayers are offered for the departed who are not yet fully at rest. He names it a bond of intercession, the living asking mercy for the dead, and the dead already held in the love of God, encouraging the living to faith and patience. He reminds you that this is not a night of spectacles, not a time for noise or fear, but a watch kept in humility for every soul, known or unknown, loved or forgotten. As he speaks, you notice how the monks refrain from even the softest cough, and you feel yourself drawn into their quiet, as if the silence itself were a kind of hospitality. The abbot explains that vigils in this season are kept with small renunciations that open room for prayer: a lighter table, bread and lentils, and ale cooled from the earth, and a candle set where memory needs a flame. He speaks of names read from the Book of Remembrance, the Abbey's necrology, so that those who labored before may be held close by those who labor now. He mentions that All Saints gathers every known witness, apostles, martyrs, and those whose virtue was sung, while All Souls bends toward the unrecorded many, the ordinary dead whose goodness was lived in kitchens, fields, and small kindnesses. In some places, he says, bells are tolled for the dead, and the Psalm De Profundis is recited, not to stir dread, but to invite hope from the depths. He nods to the custom of giving alms on these days, and even to the simple practice, in certain towns, of distributing small cakes for prayers said at doorways, a way of weaving charity through the lanes. Centuries from now, he adds gently, fragments of harvest customs and travelling plays, of lanterns carved from roots, and the children masked in jest, will mingle with these dates until a different festival blooms, the one many will call Halloween. Yet tonight remains what it has long been here, a quiet vigil, a keeping of watch that binds field and cloister, living hands and the hands that have already let go. You sit with those words while the incense thins and the flame at the altar steadies, and your thoughts turn, almost of their own accord, to the small company of your dead. You remember a mother's hymn half whispered over bread, a friend's laugh cut off by a winter illness, a stranger who once shared a crust with you at a crossroads. They gather in memory like travellers drawn to the same fire. The chant returns in a softer mode, and your losses seem to settle within it, not erased, but stroked smooth by the patience of the psalms. You do not know the melodies, yet your body begins to know when to stand and when to bend, when to let silence speak more than any syllable could. It feels strange and simple to offer a prayer for people you never met, and stranger still to imagine unseen prayers offered for you by voices you will never hear. In that exchange, in the notion that devotion can cross the narrow bridge between worlds, a gentleness takes root, and you let your shoulders drop as if setting down a pack. When the office draws to its close, the abbot lifts his hand, and the choir answers with a final cadence that hangs in the air like mist over water. The blessing touches you as it touches everyone, and the silence that follows is deep without being heavy, a rest that belongs in the body as much as in the mind. Monks begin to move, unhurried, their sandals whispering a path towards the cloister walk, and you rise with them, caught in the small current that bears the community from prayer to the night's plain duties. Outside the chapel, the cloister square deepens into darkness, and the rain sifts lightly through the arcade, leaving a peppering of droplets on rosemary and sage. The scent slips up to meet you. You think of the 3 days as a kind of folded blanket, this vigil, the feast, and the remembrance yet to come, and it feels right to nestle beneath it, letting it cover both the living and the dead. In the half-light, a brother gestures toward the guest house, but you hesitate, taking one last look back at the door you have just passed through, and the stones that held the chant aloft. Some part of the music lingers, a quiet thread still drawn through you, and you follow it into the gentle dark, where rest waits without haste. The guest brother guides you along the east walk of the cloister to a narrow door that opens into a traveller's cell, the kind the house keeps for wayfarers with tired feet. His lantern makes a slow coin of light on the flagstones, then lifts to show the room. A plain bed with a straw tick, a rough woven woolen blanket folded at its foot, a small chest, and a peg for your damp cloak. Smoke from the great kitchen has threaded even here, leaving a faint, comforting scent in the wool, alongside a whisper of lavender from the herb plot outside. You set your bundle down and feel the cool breath of stone on your cheeks, the night's damp kept at bay by walls built for patience rather than haste. The brother places a stub of candle on the sill, bows without words, and withdraws, his sandals hushed by the custom of silence that holds after the last prayers. When he closes the door, the latch falls with a soft, decisive click that makes the chamber feel both smaller and safer, like a cupped hand. After Compline, the Abbey settles into a hush that is deep but not empty, a quiet alive with the memory of psalms just sung. You can still hear a faint echo from the choir, as if the chant were a strand of smoke that has not yet dispersed entirely, curling down the passage and lingering in the pores of the stone. The great silence takes hold, the rule that no idle words break the night, and though it is not your custom, you lean into it and find it gentler than you feared. The day's small anxieties, the slippery road and the wary glances at the gate, become like mud drying and flaking from your boots as stillness works its way over your skin. You think of the abbot's brief words earlier, the reminder that this is the vigil of All Hallows, that the hours belong to remembrance more than to worry, and the thought sits in you with the weight of something well made. Breath by breath, the long room of the cloister outside seems to fold around you, not to exclude you, but to allow a corner where you can simply rest. The bed greets your bones with the mild crackle of straw, each stem shifting to find its place beneath your hips, and the blanket's heft draws warmth up from your body as if from a banked fire. A draught explores the shutter, but it is not unfriendly. It carries the scent of wet rosemary and sage from the garth, leaves shining after the rain, and giving up their green fragrance to the night. Somewhere under the eaves a drip finds a steady pace, tapping the same spot over and over like a monk's finger marking a text. The candle flame gutters once and steadies, throwing a small golden oval on the lime-washed wall, as if to say that a little light is enough when the world is unhurried. Your palms remember the grain of the bread you ate, the simple chew of it, and the way the cellar-cooled ale entered you like a promise that the day's travel would be redeemed by sleep. The long corridor outside yields a single soft footfall, and then nothing, the silence returning as firmly as a tide. When the night bell speaks, it does not shatter the quiet. It only gathers it into measures, a slow pulse that counts what no one needs to see. The sound rises from the tower, passes through stone and air and skin until it becomes the rhythm by which your breath decides to move. You know, even as your eyes close, that the choir will rise again for the night office, that in this century, men of this house wake in darkness for matins, sometimes called the vigil, to praise the hours that most travellers simply sleep away. The bell is not a summons to you, yet it includes you all the same, as though hospitality extends even to the senses of a stranger. Between peals, you hear a faint stir of sandals in the distance, and perhaps the shiver of a page turning, somewhere beyond your wall. The discipline is theirs, yet its order lends you a sense of being kept, of being watched over by a pattern older than your weariness. Within the slow movement of these hours, remembrance becomes something you carry without effort, a small ember warming your thought. Here, in the late 14th century, the eve of All Saints is not a night for masks or mischief, but a vigil braided with fasting and prayer, a keeping of company with all who have gone before. The community will mark 3 days, this evening's watchfulness, the feast tomorrow for all the saints known and unknown, and the following commemoration of all faithful departed, so that the living and the dead meet in devotion rather than in fear. Names are kept in books and in hearts, benefactors and kin and those with no marker at all, and the monks' voices lift them with the same steady care. Centuries from now, bits of older harvest customs and folk rites will mingle with this season and turn toward merriment and play. But the seed underneath is this quiet pledge to remember and to hope. Thinking of your own dead, you feel no sharp edge, only a slow, round kindness, as if the Abbey's stones know how to hold grief until it cools and becomes gratitude. Sleep comes in pieces at first, like a flock of small birds that must circle and decide where to settle, and then it arrives all at once, sure-footed and unhurried. The bell's next stroke folds itself into your breathing. Even the small sounds, the drip at the eaves, the distant shuffle of brothers, the soft cluck of the candle dying, fall into a pattern that reassures rather than alarms. Your back loosens, your hands unclench, and the road that had kept you taut and alert releases you, strand by strand, into the care of this place. You know that when dawn comes, a thin light will sketch the cloister arches, and the herbs will lift their fragrant heads. But for now the night is complete in its simple gifts. Wrapped in wool that smells of smoke and lavender, you are no longer a stranger at the edge of a threshold. You belong to the quiet as much as anyone breathing within these walls. With that you let go, and the blessing that has been hovering patiently all evening finally rests upon your eyes.
Night settles like a woolen cloak, heavy and kind, and you feel the stillness take root around you. The walls hold the day's damp at bay, and the last threads of chant seem to linger in the rafters, soft as moth wings. Somewhere beyond the cloister, rain taps at the leaded panes, unhurried, like someone quietly counting. You breathe with it, finding a rhythm that asks nothing of you. The vigil of this night has a long memory. It gathers the humble and the mighty in the same tender net and lets them drift together on the calm of prayer. Names need not be spoken. The intention alone is a lantern, steady and small, cutting a circle of light where you rest. In the 14th century, this evening asked for little more than watchfulness and a simple, fasting heart. And you can feel that gentleness still, a patient custom folded into the stones. It is not a time of masks and fright, but of open hands, of listening. The boundaries blur in quiet ways. No clamor, only breath, candle, bell. You sense the garden asleep beyond the cloister walk, rosemary brushing the air with its dusky resin, sage carrying the memory of sunlight, even in the dark. The earth smells like a slow promise. The monks move as shadows on water. Their presence is a reassurance, not a demand. You are not expected to become anything other than what you are. A traveler, pausing, held for a while in a house that keeps the hours. Under the blankets, straw whispers and linen warms. The bed knows the shape of pilgrims. Your thoughts grow light and leaf-like, flutter once, then settle. Whatever roads lie ahead have been softened by this pause, the way rain softens clods into soil. The bell at midnight will not wake you. It will fold itself into your dreaming and carry you a little farther, like a tide beneath a sleeping boat. You are part of the hush now, part of the ancient conversation that needs no words. The night keeps its watch. The prayers keep their circle. The rain keeps time on the stones.